Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Baruch Hashem, a new parak Almana Lekohen Gadol, the seventh parak of Maseches Yevamos, a fresh Mishnah. As an introduction to this parak, we know in English we have this word called a dowry, where one brings money or wealth of some kind into a marriage. Now, there are two kinds of monies that a wife can bring into the marriage. One is referred to as nichsei melug, and the other is referred to as nichsei tzon barzel. Nichsei melug is something that throughout the marriage, she actually owns. It is hers, even though normally, masha kana isha kana bala, normally, whatever a woman acquires throughout marriage, she does not own, her husband does. However, if let's say her father said, I'm giving you this animal, here is a cow, the cow is yours. He figures it's great for the future because it'll have babies, it will be able to produce milk, and he gives her the cow. She owns the cow. She owns the principal cost of that cow, maybe even the cow itself. However, the peiros, the fruits, that which we gain from the cow does belong to the husband. However, nichsei tzon barzel are different. Nichsei tzon barzel is when a wife brings something into the marriage and says, this is for you, then the husband keeps the product and she benefits from it. So let's say the reverse, the husband gets the cow and she can use the milk from the cow or the calves from the cow. L'may nafkamina is that nichsei tzon barzel are coded into the ksuba. That's the nafkamina between them. So nichsei melug is hers, she brings to the marriage, but it's hers. And nichsei tzon barzel are things that she brings to the marriage, and it is now part of the ksuba. So masayim zuz and part of the ksuba, the cow. That's the difference between them. With that as a background, we're going to learn this first Mishnah, and it will take us, how far are we going here? We're going almost to the bottom of Samach Zayin Amud Aleph, and then on Shabbos we'll pick up with Samach Zayin Amud Beis and Samach Ches. A reminder that on Shabbos Daf Yomi is right after the 2:30 Mincha, will not be at regular time. Let's get started. The Mishnah says, Almana lekohen gadol, a forbidden marriage, where a woman who was widowed marries a kohen gadol, or grusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyot, or a woman who is either divorced or had chalitza done, who marries a regular kohen, also a forbidden relationship. Says the Mishnah, hichnisa lo avdei melug ve'avdei tzon barzel. If what she brings to the marriage is avadim, slaves that are melug, slaves that she owns, or if they are slaves that are tzon barzel, that are woven into the ksub and really belong to the husband, so then the following should be the halacha. Avdei melug lo yochlu b'truma. The avadim that she brought that are melug, that really she owns, they're not allowed to eat truma. Why are they not allowed to eat truma? So take a look at Rashi. Rashi is about a quarter of the way down on the page. Dibur hamaschal avdei melug lo yochlu. Why? Because remember that this relationship is a forbidden relationship. Let's focus in just as one of the samples of the almana to the kohen gadol. Rashi says, "Lefi she'hein shela v'hi chalala." She did something very wrong. She shouldn't have married that man. She becomes a chalala. So when she brings in the avadim that are nichsei melug, that are really dependent on her because she really owns them, but because she's a chalala, she can't have truma. And because she can't have truma, her nichsei melug, the avadim that she brought in that are nichsei melug, they also can't have truma. So that's what the Gemara says, that avdei melug lo yochlu b'truma and avdei tzon barzel yochlu. However, the avadim that have been woven into the ksuba that really belong to the husband, the nichsei tzon barzel, who in this case are avadim, they are yochlu. They are allowed to eat the truma. Here are some of the parameters of how we define avdei melug. In this case, it really could be any nechasim. In this case, it's avadim. So says the Mishnah, imesu mesula, that if they die, it's her financial loss. V'im hosiru hosirula, and if they go up in cost, she's the beneficiary as well. So that's how we know that they're hers. And afal pi shehu chayav b'mezonosan, and even though due to the structure and halachic setup of the marriage that the husband is obligated to feed these slaves, harei elu lo yochlu b'truma, still the halacha is that they are not allowed to eat truma. Okay, and ve'eluhein avdei tzon barzel. Here are some of the parameters of the avdei tzon barzel, of the avadim that she brought to the marriage that she gave to her husband that are now part of the ksuba. Imesu mesulo, if they die, he takes the fiscal loss. V'mosiru hosirulo, and he also is the beneficiary if the cost in the market goes up on these slaves. And ho'el v'hu chai b'achrayusan, since he is not just chai b'mazonosan, not like in the previous case of nichsei melug, but here when he actually is the owner of them, because he's chai b'achrayusan, not only for their food but for their overall well-being. Therefore, harei elu yochlu b'truma, and that's the distinction in case number one, a forbidden marriage. She's a chalala. Therefore, by nichsei melug, which she owns, she cannot give truma to the nichsei melug because she's a chalala. But he is not a halal. He's a kohen. It's a good. We'll discuss this another time. He's not a halal, and therefore, if he has nichsei tzon barzel, which really he owns because because he's a Kohen, he's allowed to give the avadim under him truma. All of that is case number one. It is a lot of background, but important information to hold on to for tonight. Again, one more review. Nichse Melug is that which she brings to the marriage that really she owns, and Nichse Tzon Barzel is that which she brings to the marriage that really belongs to the husband. Good. Second case of the Mishnah. Let's talk about a marriage that isn't forbidden. Bas Yisrael, a regular Yisrael, shenises laKohen. My sister-in-law, she married a Kohen. Fine. So then, v'hichnisa lo avadim. She brings to the marriage slaves. Her father says, "Here, sweetheart, here are a couple of slaves to bring to the marriage." Now, here, because the marriage is a healthy halachic marriage, bein avdei melug, bein avdei tzon barzel, harei elu yochlu b'truma. Now, here in this case, because the marriage is permissible, because the wife is not a halala like she was in the case of the Reisha, therefore, even the case of nichse melug are able to eat truma because she's able to eat truma. In the beginning of our Mishnah, she was a halala, so she cannot eat truma. But here, she's not a halala. She's just a bas Yisrael who married a Kohen. Now that she's married, she's able to have truma, and therefore the avadim that she brought are able to eat the truma as well. So bein avdei melug, bein avdei tzon barzel hareilu yochlu b'truma.
She still owns one set of slaves, though, right?
If they're nichse melug, she owns them, and if they have children, the children belong to him, because she keeps the principle of what she was given, but any of the fruits, quote unquote, belong to the husband. That's correct. Good. Third case of the Mishnah. What if it's ubas kohen shenises Yisrael? Now, a bas kohen in her childhood home is allowed to eat truma because her father is a kohen. When she marries a Yisrael, she loses that right. So if you have a bas Yisrael who marries a Yisrael, v'hichnisa lo avadim, and she brings slaves into the marriage, bein avdei melug, bein avdei tzon barzel, hareilu lo yochlu b'truma, because she lost her rights. He for sure can't have. He was never a kohen. She's a bas kohen. She loses her status. She's subject to his status, which is a Yisrael, and therefore I don't care who the avadim are. Nobody's getting truma. She's done. She loses out. End of the Mishnah. Now, we said in the beginning of our Mishnah that this almana who married a Kohen Gadol, or this grusha or chalutza who married a Kohen Hedjot, that if she brings nichse melug, that they're not allowed to eat truma, even though she's married to a Kohen. Why is that? That's the Gemara's question. It's going to take us most of the Amud to try and answer it. We will see 5 answers to this question. Let's ask the question in halachic terms, though. The avdei melug lo yochlu b'truma. We said in the beginning of our Mishnah that if a woman who has the forbidden marriage, she's a halala. If that's true, and we say lo yochlu b'truma amai, what is the halachic reason? We can understand conceptually she's a halala and therefore she can't eat it. What are the mechanics of that prohibition? Really, what should happen is lehave kinyano shekana kinyan. It should be no different than anything else, because if the mechanics of the marriage work, if the almana can, in technical terms, be married, even though it's usher, so he should be kona everything that she has, and then okay, yeah, it's nichse maluk, but still, why wouldn't we say that there's a kinyan here of him that's strong enough to make her accessible to truma, that therefore allows the avadim of the nichse maluk to have truma? We should say that the kinyan works. Zetanya, the Brisa writes, a little bit more than a third of the way down, minayin lekohen shenasa isha v'kana avadim sheyochlu b'truma. We have a case in the Brisa. How do we know that where a kohen marries a woman, here a woman that technically is permissible to be married, and there are avadim that were brought in that they eat truma? Shenemar, it's a pasuk in Chumash, v'kohen ki yiknen nefesh kinyan kasba hu yochal bo. Umeinayin leisha shekansa avadim, a woman who purchases slaves, ve'avadav shekanu avadim, or avadim that buy other slaves, sheyochlu b'truma, shenemar v'kohen ki yiknen nefesh kinyan kasba hu yochal bo, kinyano shekana kinyan ochel. So says the Gemara in this Brisa, we have a clear case, a halachic case, that if in fact there is a marriage between a Kohen and another person, the din is that there should be a kinyan, and therefore we should even argue that by the nichse melug, by that which she brought into the marriage, even though she's a halala, we still need to understand why they can't eat it. They did nothing wrong. She's a halala and he's a Kohen. So we have a lot of strings being pulled here. Why is it that the avadim are not allowed to eat the truma? So here's answer number 1. Says the Gemara a little bit more than halfway down. Kol ha'ochel ma'achil, kol she'ein ochel ein ma'achil. It's very simple. Whoever is responsible for these avadim, if that person can eat truma, then the avadim can eat truma. And kol she'ein ochel, whoever is not able to eat truma, in this case, the wife, the almana who married the Kohen Gadol because she's a halala, therefore eino ma'achil. So that seems to be a good answer, is that all we're doing is looking at a hierarchy. If the person who brought the nichsei melug to the party, if that person's eligible for truma, then the avadim are eligible for truma, and if not, not. So says the Gemara, that's not a good argument. V'lo, that cannot be. Why? V'harei arel v'chol hatmein. If you have someone who is an arel, he's uncircumcised, or someone who's tamei, she'enan ochlin, they're not allowed to eat truma. An arel can't eat truma, a tamei can't eat truma, yet what do we know from Rashi? Uma'achilin, but if they had avadim, their avadim could eat it. Oh, so we see that the rule isn't right. You wanted to say that let's look at the hierarchy. Whoever's in charge of the avadim, if they can eat truma, great, then their avadim can too. And if they cannot, then their avadim can't. But an arel cannot, yet a zevet can, breaks the rule. So therefore the Gemara says, no, hasam pumayhu kaivlehu. This is which one? The simile is using like or as. This is just a metaphor. He has a mouth sore. What does that mean? The reason I'm not eating truma is equivalent to me having a mouth sore. I'm not eating the truma because I don't want truma, but it's because I have a sore in my mouth. This is the same thing with the arelus and with the tuma. I'm not eating the truma because I'm ineligible. I can get circumcised whenever I want. I can get rid of my tuma in a matter of days. So therefore, it's a technical issue that I have right now, but be'etzem, I'm shaykh to the achila of truma. So says the Gemara, no, v'harei mamzer she'ein ochel u'machil. A mamzer could never change his status, and he's never able to eat truma, yet still his avadim can eat truma. So says the Gemara, that's a good point. And therefore, we have to go away from our first answer. Here's answer number 2. Amar Ravina, you're right. It shouldn't be about whether or not in the hierarchy that he who is in charge or she who is in charge of the avadim can or cannot eat. It's not about that. It's about the kinyan shabo of these avadim. Kinyan ochel ka'amar. Kinyan ochel machil. She'eno ochel eno machil. If the kinyan is the type of kinyan that would allow for one to eat, even though in theory the mamzer can't eat it, fine. But if in theory the kinyan should generate achilas truma, then all is well and good. And that would explain our Mishnah as well. So in theory, it should have worked out. But here, this woman with her kinyan, because she's a halala, didn't work out. So it kind of explains our Mishnah as a viable answer. The Rava, this is like a Musar answer. The Rava Amar, no, you got it all wrong. Rava says, Mida Oraisa, Meichal Achle. Really, mida oraisa, it's mutter, it's completely permissible for the avadim of this halala, the nichsei melug, the avdei melug, they are absolutely allowed to eat the truma. However, the rabbanan hu de gazre behu, the rabbanan put in a rabbinic injunction against the avadim eating. Why? To mess with her psychology. She's married to someone that she's not allowed to be married with. What did they want to generate? Kidei shetomar, so that she'll say to herself, Ani eini ocheles, I'm not allowed to eat as it is because I'm a halala. Avodai einan ochlin. My avodim are also not allowed to eat. Oi, zona hi etzlo. This woman, referring to herself, is a zona. It's not really znus necessarily, but she's a halala, and it might make her rethink everything. And therefore, hilkach asila apuka. She's more likely to leave the marriage. So the rabbinic injunction in our Mishnah against the nichsei melug, the avdei melug, having access to truma, is simply to generate in the eyes of the woman, the halala who married the Kohen Gadol, the almana, to say, maybe I shouldn't be in this marriage. More likely, ki'ilu, and this is complicated, but let's say there was a rabbinic injunction against going to a marriage that halacha doesn't agree with for family members. So I just, shiloh in the community just came up. There's someone, okay, there's a shiloh, should a family member go to a marriage where it's two people of the same gender? So this person asked a shiloh, told you should not go. Now, obviously, that generates within the family, like, what am I doing? Like, that's what's going on here. The Mishnah says this whole rabbinic injunction is to get her out of this marriage as much as humanly possible. You want to feed your avadim, you're not allowed to give them access to truma. Why? Slap on the wrist. It's got to make you think that this marriage is wrong. That's answer number 3. Answer number 4. Rav Ashi Amar, yes, it's a gzeira, but not what you're talking about. Gzeira shema tachil la'achar misa. Oh, here's the problem. What we're concerned about is that she may feed truma to the avadim after the kohen dies, and that is absolutely not allowed. Says the Gemara, if you are concerned about people eating truma after death when they're not allowed to, then what about a regular boring case? Elameata bas Yisrael shenises lekoin lo ta'achil. That if you have a case of a bas Yisrael and she marries a kohen, she shouldn't feed her avadim either, even though the marriage is perfect. Kaftor v'ferach, it's a beautiful marriage, but it doesn't matter because maybe after her husband dies and she falls back to her Yisrael status, her avadim may still be eating from the truma. So says the Gemara, you're right. And here is answer number 5. Remember our question, why is it that in our Mishnah that the Avdei Malug do not eat Truma? And answer number 5, about 8-9 lines from the bottom of the page on Samech Vav, Amar Aleph, Ela Amar Rav Ashi, we actually have a very nuanced case. What's the case of our Mishnah where we restrict the Nichsei Malug from eating Truma? Says the Gemara, Be'almana Kohenes. The Almana is a Kohenes herself. She's not a Yisrael. She's an Almana Kohenes. The Asya Le'oruye, she may come to teach, she may come to think the following. Me'ikara, before I was married, achle b'truma de nasha. I was able to eat truma when I lived in my parents' house. And then in Sibi Leilahai, then I married this guy, the Almana marries the Kohen Gadol, achle b'truma de gavroi, and she is going to eat the truma of her husband, so she thinks. V'hashta hadri li milsa kamaisa. Now that he died, she says she's back to where she was before in the Beit Nasha, back at home. Yes, and then velo yada, what her mistake was is that she didn't know demeikara lo shavisa l'nafsha chalala. Before she married the Kohen Gadol, she wasn't a chalala, but hashta shavisa l'nafsha chalala. She made an error in judgment. So therefore, we don't allow her to eat, we don't allow her to feed her avadim, anything of the sort, because we need to make sure that she doesn't make a mistake that if the husband dies. Says the Gemara. You have a question?
Where was the mistake that she made?
The mistake, she had a logic like this. When she was single, she's a Kohen, right? She's a Bas Kohen. So when she's single, no problem. I live in my dad's house. My dad's a Kohen. I can eat truma. And then she gets married to this guy Be'isser, and she's going to eat truma there too. And then her husband dies, and she goes back to her parents' house, and she's like, "I'm just like I was before I was married." No, you're not. Now you're a halala. So you might have thought that you went back to status quo, pre-marriage status, where you were a kosher Kohenes, but you're not. You're a halala. That was the error in her thinking.
So she didn't marry Kohen.
She married a Kohen Be'isser initially. She was married to someone. She was married to someone who became an almana. And as an almana, she married a Kohen Gadol. Okay. And then her husband died and she came back home. Yeah. I'm sorry. You're right. I left out the first marriage. Correct. So it says the Gemara, listen, great answer. Great ukimta. Tenach, that's good in the case of almana Kohenes. But almana bas Yisrael ma'ika l'meimar. We don't have the svara of a bas Yisrael going home after her husband dies saying, "Oh, I can still eat." No, you're a Yisrael. Everybody knows you're a Yisrael. You can't eat truma anymore. Everybody knows that. It says the Gemara, be'almanusa lo plug rabbanan. Gears to change. Lo plug rabbanan. Lo plug rabbanan throughout Shas is basically a sweeping halachic, a rabbinic halachic injunction that the halacha is X here and everywhere else, even though you're right, that logic would dictate that in certain cases the restriction shouldn't be employed, but lo plug rabbanan, we don't mess around. In no cases do we allow an almana, Yisrael or otherwise, who was married to the Kohen Gadol to go back as a Yisrael. We don't allow it at all. No almanas are allowed to eat truma after the death of their husband. All right. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Remember, we spoke about Nichsei Tzon Barzel. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Nichsei Tzon Barzel. Another detail about Nichsei Tzon Barzel is that they have to have what's called a shama or shom. They have to be assessed for their value because, as mentioned, that value gets woven into the ksuba. So says the Gemara, Itmar, Hamachaneses shum lebaila. She brings something that has a value to it to her husband. She brings a couch to the house. It's a $5,000 couch. So they weave that into the ksuba. That's the shum. He omeres kli anino teles. If when they get divorced, she's going to say, I get the actual couch back, not the financial value. I get the actual couch back. And vihu omer damim anino sein. I'll give you the financial equivalent of the couch. Here's $5,000, but you don't get the couch itself. Now that may not be easy because it might be a family heirloom. So what's the din? Hadin im mi. Very strange language, no? I don't think I've ever seen this in this frame. Not that means anything that I haven't seen it, but I don't think we've seen it in Shas yet. Hadin imi. Who is the halacha like? Do we say that she's right and she gets the actual item of the Nichsei Tzon Barzel when she gets divorced, or when he dies, or does she only get the financial equivalent? This is a machlokas amarai. Rav Yehuda Omar, as we turn to the top of Samach Vav Amud Beis, Hadin ima. she gets to keep it. Rashi, v'sitol keleha, she can take whatever she actually brought. Rav Ami Amar Hadinimo, that really the halacha is with him, that whatever she brought doesn't matter. He has to give the market value of that item right now. So let's say the couch fluctuated, whatever it is, she will receive a cash value, but not the item itself. Rav Yehuda Amar Hadinima, why is it that Rav Yehuda said that she gets the actual item? Because Mishum Shvach Beis Avia Didahave, because that was something that was praiseworthy in her father's house. It was given to her as a gift because of its inherent value, not only because of its fiscal value, so she gets the item back. Rav Ami Amar Hadinimo, why is it that we would say that according to Rav Ami that she gets the financial value but not the item itself? Because Kevan de Amar Mar, what did it say in our Mishnah about the parameters of Nichse Tzon Barzel? That Imeso Mesolo, that he takes the loss, the husband takes the loss on the Nichse Tzon Barzel, V'im Hosiru Lo, and if there's a gain, he takes the benefits. And what else did the Mishnah say? Hoel v'chai b'achrayusan yochlu. Because he, the father, the husband, is chai b'achrayusan, he's obligated to take care of these items that are Nichse Tzon Barzel. So Rav Ami is looking at our Mishnah, he's like, what are you talking about? Of course the Nichse Tzon Barzel belong to the husband. She doesn't get the item back. She only gets the financial equivalent of the item, the dollar amount that was added to the ksuba, because it's Nichse Tzon Barzel. Those are really his. So says the Gemara, that's not so simple that they're actually fully really his. Why? Because says the Gemara 5 lines down on Samach Vav Amud Beis, Amar of Safra, Miktani v'hein shalo. Does our Mishnah indicate v'hein shalo that really they are actually properly his property? No. It says that he's just chai b'achrayusan, but they're still not his. She still has a halachic tethering to that item. And that, therefore, ula olam lavdi deinin. When Rav Safra pushes back against Rav Ami, it's hard to say this from the Gemara. It seems that Rav Safra is not in Rav Ami's camp and he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. But either way, this is the split of the Amoraim. On the one hand, if a woman brings Nichse Tzon Barzel, something of value, and it gets put into the ksuba with its dollar amount. So Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that upon divorce, if ever her ksuba needs to be collected, she gets the item itself back. Rav Ami says, no, you give actually only the dollar amount. Says the Gemara, something in our Mishnah is a little bit strange. We had said in our Mishnah that if there were Nichse Tzon Barzel and they were chai b'achrayusa, and that really they belonged to the husband who was a Kohen, that all of the avadim are able to eat truma. That's what our Mishnah says. So says the Gemara, is that really true? Well, it's not. We have a Mishnah. Yisrael shesachar parami kohen. If you have a Yisrael who rents a cow from a Kohen, hareze ya'achilena karshine truma. So even though the person is a Yisrael, but since the Kohen owns the animal, so you can give karshine truma, you can give animal fodder that is truma to this animal, no problem. The reverse, Kohen shesachar para Yisrael. If there's a Kohen who rented the para from Yisrael, and so who owns it? Really, the Yisrael owns it. Afal pi shemizonoseha alav lo yachilena karshine truma. Even though Yisrael is the one who's achroi right now to feed this animal, still he's not allowed to give karshine truma. So that shows us that we have a case where a person is chai b'achrayusan and still there's no truma. Says the Gemara of a Tizbara, that's not even logical. It's true that in this case that the Kohen who's watching over the para of the Israel, it's true that he's chayiv in Geneva ve'aveda, but he doesn't have full responsibility for the animal. But say if something bad happens to the animal, that's an ones, or b'kachasha if the animal loses a lot of weight. If the animal loses a lot of value, of course, in a rental, you would not be held accountable for that. It's unfortunate. It's just the way things are. Okay, so says the Gemara, therefore that's not a good argument. But there is a good point to be made from the seifa of the brisa that we just quoted. What's that case? Yisrael shesham para mi kohen. Yisrael is evaluating the cost of a para that used to belong to a kohen. Under those circumstances, lo ya'achilena karshine truma. Here we see that you cannot give truma to that animal. Aval kohen shesham para mi Yisrael. The reverse. If a kohen is evaluating a para for Yisrael, ya'achilena karshine truma. So this actually would be a good question against our Mishnah, and the Gemara seems to leave it as is. But back to our conversation, we were discussing that if a woman brings nichse tzon barzel, she brings property to the marriage and weaves it into the ksuba, Rabbi Yehuda says she gets the item back when she collects her ksuba, and Rabbi Ami says, nope, she only gets the dollar amount. So halfway down on Samach Vav Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Yosef Rabba v'Rav Yosef b'Shili Pirkei to Rav Nachman. They were learning with Rav Nachman, v'Yasve Ka'amre. And they were talking about this sugya and learning, and here's what they said. Tanya Kavased Rabbi Yehuda. We have a brisa that seems to align with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that she gets the actual item back. V'Tanya Kavased Rav Ami, yet there's another brisa that supports Rav Ami that she doesn't get the item back, but rather only the dollar equivalent. Tanya Kavase de Rav Ami. What's the brisa that supports Rav Ami that she only gets the dollar amount? Says the Gemara. Avdei tzon barzel, that if you have servants that were brought into a marriage as tzon barzel, they're brought in to be part of the ksuba. Yotzin b'shein ve'ayin leish avalo leisha. So we know that there's a din that avadim go free if they get injured in certain areas. If a tooth falls out and if their eye gets poked out, so then the halacha is they go free. But only if who hurts them? Leish. Only the husband, below the isha. But a woman who does this, she would not free the slaves, which goes to show you.
Wife.
What?
So the Kohen's wife knocks out of his teeth, he's still a slave.
And that's his raya, that the nichsei tzon barzel are owned by the husband, and therefore they only have to give the dollar equivalent. Exactly right. But Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Yehuda, we have another brisa that seems to be like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that she does actually get the item back. What's that case? Hamachneses shum lebaila. A woman brings something worth evaluating to her husband. That's code word for nichsei tzon barzel. A woman brings nichsei tzon barzel. Imrotza haba'a limkor. If the husband wants to sell them, what's the din? Lo yimkor. He's not allowed. Why? Because they're not his. They're still hers. You cannot give away the nichsei tzon barzel of the wife. Not only that, even if he added in from his own, she is halachically tied to all nichsei tzon barzel. He cannot get rid of it. That item is inherently valuable to the wife. Machru shneim leparnasa, both of them sold them in agreement. If both of them sold them, zeh haya ma'isa lifnei rashbag v'amar habal motzi midei miyad lekuchos. And if it was sold without her rishus, or if she died, whatever the case may be, then that money can be recollected because the husband's not allowed to sell it without her rishus. It's not his. It's still partially hers. So says the Gemara, how do we paskin? 3/4 of the way down, 12 lines up or so. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda. We paskin halacha l'maisa that when it comes to nichsei tzon barzel, when a woman brings something of value into a marriage and codes it into the ksuba, the halacha is that when she collects, she gets the actual item back, not just the dollar amount. Amar le Rav Nachman, Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. That's not so simple. What happened to the brisa about Rav Ami? I understand that you got a brisa that supports Rabbi Yehuda, but we have to have integrity in our psak process. How did you just ignore the brisa of Rav Ami? V'atanya kavasi de Rav Ami. Says the Gemara, Afal Gab, the Tanya kavasi de Rav Ami. Even though it's true that when it comes to the brisa of Rav Ami, there really is a brisa, which would imply that she only gets the dollar value. Still, mistabra taima de Rabbi Yehuda mishum shvach beisavia. So what's happening here is that the psak that's being given is where the posek is looking at two features. And one of the things he's looking at is that the svara, the logic of Rabbi Yehuda, that this is shvach beisavia, this is something valuable that relates to her parents' house. Therefore, you cannot give away that item. And when she does collect her ksuba, she does not get only the dollar amount, she gets the actual item back. And a quick story. Hahi itza da'ayla leila gavra. In Itztila, Demilsa Biksuvasa, a woman, when she entered her marriage, gave a very expensive wool garment, and it was Milsa Biksuvasa, and it was woven into her ksuba, classical Nichsei Tzon Barzel. Shachiv, that if there was, and then there was a man who died, and Shakluha Yasme Upirsua Amisna, and they took this garment, the Yasme, the Yasomim, the orphans of this man, took the garment, and they spread it out on top of the person who died. Amar Rava, Kanye Misna. What happens with this? It's not theirs. It's Nichsei Tzon Barzel. It belongs to the wife. If you're a Rabbi Yehuda Yid, then you can't do that. It's not yours. It belongs to her. You can't take my item and put it on a mace and he gets to keep it. It's not his. It's tacky to pull it off of him. I understand the social concerns, but halachically that's mine. Why would Rava say that there's a kinyan for putting it on the mace? So Amar Le Na'anoi Bered Rabbi Yosef.
The mace acquired it?
Correct. Exactly. Well, it means it stays with him. Of course, he doesn't have any bilas, but it means it stays with him. So Amar Le Na'anoi Bered Rabbi Yosef. That was the son of Rabbi Yosef, who was Bered Rava Le Rav Kahana. Hold on one second. How can you say that the mace gets to keep it? If Rabbi Yehuda holds that Nichsei Tzon Barzel belonged to the wife, the actual item, you can't give away this itztala. You cannot give away this woolen garment. Says the Gemara, Amar Le. Milo Moder Rabbi Yehuda the Mechusar Gubaina. Doesn't even Rabbi Yehuda agree that there's something lacking in her ownership now of this garment? What's lacking? It's not in her possession right now. Right now, it's in her husband's possession. So says the Gemara, even he would agree, v'chevan de mechusar gubaina, since while technically she has rights to it, but because she's mechusar gubaina, it's not really in her possession. Therefore, birshusei kai, it is kept in the rishus of the mason. She cannot have it back. It's really interesting. It's like a real blend of like, it's Rabbi Yehuda, you get the item back, but it's mechusar gubaina, so you own it, but not fully own it because it's nichsei tzon barzel. The husband has his teeth in it also. So not so simple you have to get into the Rishonim to understand the lumdus of where we are. But nevertheless, the lack of her having it in her possession minimizes her ownership. Rava l'taime. Rava, who says that the mace gets to keep this, is because of as follows. Da'amar Rava, hektish chametz v'shichror. This we learned. That was in this Masechta. Where did we learn this? Yes. Okay, only 20 blot ago. Feels like it was a couple hundred blot ago. Says the Gemara that we learned this already. Hektish chametz v'shichror. When it comes to someone who used as collateral hektish, that which was given to the Beis Hamikdash, or chametz, or something that was done for shichror, the halacha is mafkin midei shibud, that if these things get turned, right, if the chametz becomes aser, whatever the case may be, then what? Rashi says v'shichror Yisrael sheshiabad avdo lebal chov. You take a slave and you use him as collateral. However, in all of these cases, mafkin midei shibud, they all, under certain circumstances, their shibud could be removed. And what the Gemara is saying is that this is Rava l'taime. That's very similar to our case, that yes, they really do belong to her. The nichsei tzon barzel really belong to her, but the mechusar gubaina means that it's quasi, not hers as well. So again, it's a little bit in the twilight zone. Rabbi Yehuda. Let's talk a halachic case, which will bring us to the Mishnah, and then we'll head toward the bottom of the page. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ichnisa lo shnei kelim be'elav zuz." She brings in two kelim into the marriage be'elav zuz, and here we're talking about nichsei tzon barzel. We're talking about what we've been talking about for the last half of the Amud. So she brings them in. They total 1,000 zuz. B'shivcho, and they improved in their value. The amdu al shnei alafim. Now they're worth 2,000 zuz. Great market, not the current market. Sounds like a great market. So says the halacha, what happens upon divorce? Echad, the one that's worth 1,000, which is what's coded in the ksuba, not laso b'ksuvasa, that's pashut. For sure she gets that item. The echad, the second one, no senes damim v'notalto. She can pay to get the actual item back. That's what the Gemara says. Mibnei shvach beisavia. And the reason why is because of Rabbi Yehuda that she gets to keep the actual item of nichsei tzon barzel. Says the Gemara. I mean, like, we kind of know that already. My kamash malan. Shvach beisavia didahave. We know that which really belongs in her parents' house is what she gets back. That was Rabbi Yehuda that we saw as we turned the page just a couple of moments ago. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda chadazimna. Rabbi Yehuda already said that on the bottom of Samach Vav Amud Beis, wrapping up to the top, on the bottom of Samach Vav Amud Aleph. And says the Gemara, why does Rabbi Yehuda have another statement over here? Says the Gemara, Ma'udatema, you might have thought that there was a quirk in regards to nichsei tzon barzel. Hani mili, when does she collect exactly what the item is? Heicha de matil the mishkal b'ksuvasa. That's when the value hasn't changed so much in the market. Aval mitan dmei umishkal lo kamash malan. I might have thought that if there was a serious bump in money, then maybe she doesn't get the bump in money. Kamash malan, that's not true. Good. New Mishnah. Says the Gemara. Bas Yisrael sheniseis lakoin umeis v'hinicha meuberes. You have a woman who's a Yisrael, her father's a Yisrael. She marries a Kohen and he dies, and she is currently pregnant. The halacha is lo yochlu avadeha betruma mipnei chelko shel ubar. The avadim of this man who died, and now these avadim who in theory are allowed to eat truma, but right now lo yochla avadim truma. Right now they can't eat truma mipnei chelko shel ubar, because there's a piece of that which belongs to his father who died, the Kohen, which is shaykh to the ubar. Shal ubar posel ve'eno machel di Rabbi Yossi, and the ubar ruins it for everybody else. What is this talking about? Let's take a look at Rashi on the fourth line. Rashi says, Dibur Hamaskal v'hinicha meuberes. Afal pi that they have other kids. Afal pi sheyesh la banim. She's pregnant, but they have other kids. Sheyesh la banim heimenu. V'hi ocheles b'truma. She's allowed to eat truma. No restrictions on her. Lo yochlu avdei tzon barzel b'truma. However, the avadim that she brought to the marriage, they cannot have truma. Lefi shehein shel yorshin. Because the truma really belongs to the yorshin. And currently we have a yoresh who's growing in utero. And says the Gemara, because the ubar does have some halachic aspect to the truma, but because he is not alive to give over rishus to them for them to have it, therefore, going back in the Mishnah, the ubar is posel ve'eno machel dibri Rabbi Yossi. However, Amar lo, the Chachamim say back to him in the Mishnah, about 10 lines down, Amar lo me'achar shehe'adata lanu al bas Yisrael lekohen. Now that you've given us insight in the case of a Yisrael who marries a Kohen, bas Kohen lekohen, the same would be true in regards to a bas Kohen who marries a Kohen. So the Chachamim expand the Shita of Rabbi Yossi that it not only applies in a case of a Yisrael who marries a Kohen, but even for a bas Kohen who marries another Kohen. What is the reason for Rabbi Yossi's strange Shita? Why is it that if she's pregnant, it might be her 10th kid and all of her other kids can have truma, she can eat truma? Why is it that the nichsei tzon barzel are trapped from having truma just because she's pregnant? So says the Gemara, time of Rabbi Yossi mishum dekasavar ubar b'mei zara zarhu. Do we say that when listen to the Chakira, when a woman is pregnant, when a Yisrael is pregnant with the child of a Kohen, but in utero the child is not a Kohen, as the Gemara says, b'mei zara zarhu, that when she's pregnant with the baby of a Kohen, but because it's in utero and she's who she is, she's not a Kohen, she's married to a Kohen, so that baby is a zar, and therefore he's not a regular baby yet. O Dilma, Yelud Ma'achil, only a child that's born would enable the Avadim to eat from the Nichsei Tzon Barzel, and She'eno Yelod, from the Truma, and She'eno Yelod, but a child that's not born, Eno Ma'achil. So this is the Chakira. A baby in utero, a woman is a Yisrael, her husband is a Kohen. Is that baby considered a zar still, a non-Kohen? Or no, the limiting factor for the Avadim of the Tzon Barzel is that he's just not born yet. It's not about Kohen, not Kohen, he's not born yet. So says the Gemara, L'may nafkamina, the difference would be, L'ubar b'mei kohenes. The difference would be if the mother of the baby was a Kohenes. Why? Because no one would argue that the baby in utero of the Kohenes is a Kohen, that's for sure. He's still not born yet, but he's definitely not a non-Kohen. Because she's a Kohenes and he's a Kohenes. The baby's 100% Kohen through and through. So there's no svara to say that Ubar b'mei imo is a zar. That doesn't make any sense. All right, says the Gemara, which one is it? Omar Rabba says, Hainu time of Rabbi Yossi. Really, Rabbi Yossi's reasoning as to why the Avadim are not eligible for Truma when she's pregnant is Dekasavar Ubar b'mei zara zarhu. He says, like the first possibility, Rabba's of the opinion that when a Bas Yisrael is pregnant with the baby of a Kohen, that while the baby is in utero, he's not yet a Kohen, he's a non-Kohen. Rav Yosef argues and takes the other side of the Chakira. Rav Yosef Amar Yulud Machil She'en Yulud Eino Machil, because he's just not born yet. It's nothing to do with Kohen status, non-Kohen status. The baby's just not born yet. So in the meantime, while she's pregnant, the Avadim who are Nichsei Tzon Barzel are not allowed to eat Truma. Basically, the Gemara says, hang on one second. We are going to be able to hopefully pick one of these two answers. Amru lo, we have this in our Mishnah, an expanded version of what happened in our Mishnah. Amru lo, they said back to him, to Rav Yossi, what then would be the din, Rav Yossi, in regards to a Bas Kohen who is pregnant with a child of a Kohen? What would the din be? Amar lehem, Rav Yossi in this brisa responds to the Chachamim, Zu shamati, I heard one of these cases, Vizu lo shamati, but another one of these cases I did not hear. I heard the case of a Yisrael who is married to a Kohen, but I didn't hear the case of a Bas Kohen who's married to a Kohen. And then the Gemara tears this apart with a beautiful, simple diuk. If you want to say that the concern of Rabbi Yossi is Rabba's concern, that when a Bas Yisrael is pregnant with the baby of a Kohen, that the concern is that the baby is a non-Kohen, that's Hainu Dika'amar Lezu Shamati V'Zulo Shamati. Then it makes sense why in this brisa Rabbi Yossi would say, I only know the answer to one of your questions, which is Yisrael married to a Kohen. Why is that true? Because if the whole concern was Bimei Imo, that doesn't make sense if she's an Eishes Kohen. It has to be that that's the concern. Otherwise, zu shamati v'zu lo shamati. That makes sense here, but it wouldn't make sense the other way, which is this. Ela iyamris, a little bit more than halfway down on Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. Ela iyamris yilud machil she'ein yilud ein machil. That really the deep concern of Rabbi Yossi is that simply the woman is still pregnant and the baby's not born yet. My zu shamati v'zu lo shamati. If it's only about birthing, then who cares what the status is of the baby is in utero? There's no difference in a Yisrael married to a Kohen and a Kohen married to a Kohen. It doesn't matter. So it has to be the other way. It's the same exact thing. It doesn't make a difference. Each woman is the same. It's just a question of birthing the child. So the Gemara says, Kasha, therefore it's very difficult to understand the Shita of Rabbi Yosef, and seemingly we would paskin like Rabbah, that Rabbah is of the opinion, even though this is not what the Gemara concludes. We have our little gimel by Rabbi Yosef, but it doesn't really make sense. Kasha, the Gemara says it's not so simple. One last little bit, we'll be ending in about 10 lines or so. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, we're about 2/3 of the way down. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Let's remember Shmuel's name here. Shmuel had a statement. Zu divrei Rabbi Yossi. We just said this in the Brisa above, that this was the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Aval Chachamim omrim yesh lo banim ochlim mishum banim. The Chachamim argue on Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said that if the woman's pregnant, then the avadim who are nechsei tzon barzel, they're not allowed to eat any of the truma. But the Chachamim don't agree. The Chachamim say, yesh lo banim ochlim. If he has any kids, ochlim mishum banim, then the avadim can eat because there are other people who are eligible to eat. Ein lo banim. If he doesn't have any other kids, ochlim mishum achim. Then if the father has brothers, then the avadim who are tzon barzel can eat. Ein lo achim ochlim mishum mishpacha kula. Anyone in the family who's eligible to eat truma would enable the avadim who are tzon barzel to eat truma. So says the Gemara, Zu, when Shmuel was of the opinion, when he said Zu, that this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, was it Zu velo svirle? This is his opinion. This is what I don't hold this way. Does Shmuel not agree with the Shita of Rabbi Yossi? How can that be? Ha'amar le, Shmuel himself said, the Rav Chana Bagdata. When we see Bagdata, we think of Baghdad. Take a look at Rashi for a historical note. Rashi is exactly halfway down on the page. Dibur hamaschal Bagdata. But that's not correct. The first sheet in Rashi says Baal Agada. He was a baki in Agadata, so he knew what was going on. But then Rashi gives the second answer, Lashon Acher, Shem Makom Shehu Bebavel, Sheshmo Baghdad. So at the very least, we know that the name of Baghdad goes back from the times of Shmuel. Shmuel lived in the 200s of the Common Era. So Baghdad is a very old name of a city. I presume it's the one that's still on location. I don't know. The Meforshim here say that it really shouldn't be about Baghdad. Okay, not for now. So says the Gemara, what happened between Shmuel and Chana Bagdata? He said, Poke Isi li be'asara, de'emalach be'anpayo. Go find me 10 Jews. It's just for dramatic flair, for dramatic effect. Go find me 10 Jews. De'emalach be'anpayo. I'll say in front of them, Hamazakil uber kana, that an uber can make a kinyan. And that is what Rav Yossi holds. So how can Shmuel say zu, which means I don't hold like Rav Yossi, if here Shmuel says to Rav Chana Bagdata that a child can make a kinyan, an ubar in utero? Ella, it must be zu v'svirale. It must be that really Shmuel does agree with Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, my kamash malon, what was he coming to teach with that? Why bother giving shiur on that? Were you coming to teach me to pligu rabbanan alei de Rabbi Yossi? Everybody knows there people argue against Rabbi Yossi. We have 3 brises, a Mishnah and 2 brises that we saw today of a machlokes Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. Says the Gemara, it's not so simple that there's someone who argues against Rabbi Yossi. Me pligi, says the Gemara with a corrected nusach here. V'ha'amar Rav Zakai zu edus heid Rabbi Yossi mipi shamai ve'avtalion v'hodulo. That other people agreed with Rabbi Yossi. It wasn't just him. There was a group of Chachamim. So maybe really nobody argues, and these brises are all messed up. Says the Gemara, that's not correct. Amar Avashi, Miktani the Kiblu. We don't know that Shammai and Avtalion agreed to this shita. All we know is Vahodilok the Mistaber Tami. It's a good svara. It's like when you ask Shiloh to a rabbi, he's like, I hear you. I'm not paskening like I hear you. You're saying good. But it doesn't mean that you're right. So yes, we still have a machlokas. We're going to stop right here at Tanu Rabbanan. Shabbos after the 2:30 mincha, we'll pick up right here, and we'll learn Samach Zayin and Bezimir Tashem, and also Daf Samaches. Wishing you all a beautiful night.